So one of the things that I've been hearing a lot from anglers when I'm talking to them out on creel surveys or getting calls or things is that they're not seeing a lot of small fish in the fishery. The vast majority of the fish that they're catching are in the low to mid 20-inch range. And one of the biggest contributing factors to that has been walleye recruitment through time, or what we consider to be recruitment is how successful walleyes are at spawning. So the way that we gauge walleye recruitment or reproduction on the Green Bay system is with fall electrofishing surveys targeting the walleyes that are about 6 months old, or what we call young of the year walleyes. They hatched the previous spring and they're about 8 to 9 inches on the Bay of Green Bay. And since 1993, we've been doing electrofishing surveys in the fall targeting these 6-month-old walleyes. We do about 8 to 9 miles of shoreline, shock about 8 to 9 miles of shoreline on the Bay of Green Bay, on the east and west shore in University Bay and Dead Horse Bay, and about 8 to 9 miles every fall on the Fox River, from a little bit downstream of the 172 bridge up to the De Pere Dam on both sides of the river. And this is a graph that shows our catch rates in our fall young of the year walleye surveys going back to 1993, which was the first year that we did these studies. So on our horizontal axis, we have the year. On our vertical axis, we have our catch rates of young of the year walleyes, or the number of 6-month-old walleyes that we catch per hour of electrofishing. So back in the early 90s, when these surveys just started, we would see a good year class every so many years, followed by a couple of completely absent year classes where there was no successful reproduction. And then eventually recruitment got a little bit more consistent, but we still had these absent year classes. But what's really important to note is this recruitment or reproduction from the years 2013 and 2018 in this time frame. Those are going to be the fish that are 7 years old to 12 years old in the bay right now. And during that time frame, we had the two largest year classes on record, the 2013 and the 2018 year classes, along with 4 years in between those where we had average or above average recruitment. So we had 6 years of phenomenal recruitment out on the Bay of Green Bay, and those fish are 7 to 12 years old right now. So those are really what fueled the really big increase in numbers of walleyes that anglers have caught over the last 4 or 5 years, and is kind of contributing to what we're seeing right now for the size structure of the fishery. So let's move on to what happened after 2018. 2019 was a little bit of a below average year class, but 2020 and 2021 were largely recruitment failures. There was very little successful natural reproduction for walleyes. So we had these 6 really big, good years of recruitment, followed by 3 years that were largely absent from, or had very poor recruitment. So those age classes are going to be largely absent from the fisheries. These missing year classes are going to be the 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. That's why anglers haven't caught very many small walleyes in recent years, is because what are now the 4, 5, and 6-year-olds are largely missing from the fishery. We do have a couple of stronger up-and-coming year classes, the 2022 and 2023 year classes, so I do expect that anglers will start to see more smaller fish in the coming years. But the primary reason why anglers are catching so many walleyes in the low to mid 20 inches is the vast majority of the walleyes in the fishery right now are in that 7 to 12-year-old range. So we have partnered with researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point to understand what the factors are that are likely driving recruitment. And the way that we do that is we look for correlations in our young of the year catch rates and environmental factors such as spring water temperatures, spring flow rates, winter severity. And it looks like the 2 primary factors that are driving walleye recruitment or success of walleye recruitment on the Bay of Green Bay are spring river flows and winter severity. In the years where we have really high spring river flows, we tend to have strong year classes. And for those of you who have been fishing the bay for the last 15, 20 years, you remember that we had really low, some record low water years in 2010, 2011, and 2012 in that time frame. And then we had really high flows for a 6 or 7 year period in the spring, but also throughout the year, that contributed to record high levels that occurred in that 2020, 2021 time frame. So in those years where we had the really high flows and we went from really low water to really high water levels, when we had those spring flows, those were the years we had really strong walleye recruitment. Also, winter severity plays a role, and that largely has to do with the food that's available to walleye shortly after they hatch. The later in the spring that those walleyes hatch, the more likely there is to be really abundant zooplankton populations for them to feed on. They require really abundant zooplankton as a food source right after they hatch. If they hatch really early in the spring, zooplankton populations haven't started to expand yet due to warming temperatures and longer daylight and things like that. So the later in the spring those walleyes hatch, the more severe we have of a winter, it pushes that spawn back for them to hatch later in the year when they're more likely to have zooplankton available for food. So that's how recruitment is playing a role in the size structure of the fishery and what anglers are seeing out there when they're fishing.